Hey everybody, I know it's been a while. This is Jake, of course. I want to give you guys a new updated deck list video. I know it's been a couple months, about 2.5 months, something like that, since my last deck list. Um, I have been through many weeks of online Edison War League in the meantime, and I've also as well been prepping for the RBET in Laurel, Maryland. I will be there. So if any of you are going to be there, feel free to say hi or reach out to me and let me know you'll be there, and I'll uh, I'll try to make sure I can see you at the venue. Um, but yeah, so I wanted to give this updated deck list video because I have actually been running this version of my list, which is different than my last list, for at least the last month and a half now. And I have really liked it. I've noticeable improvements, and I absolutely love this deck list. So since I have been running this list for like almost 2 months right now, I wanted to finally do a video on it because I found this list to be very consistent. Um, So there's maybe some noticeable differences from my last list, but I'll go over it again. Um, so we are playing less monsters in my last list, um, noticeably because my last list was 43 cards. Um, I am now playing the cards that were effectively cut were Prisma and Psychitor. Um, Prisma, I love Prisma. I originally topped Shonen Jump Edison with Prisma and Stratos and Rhoda, so I definitely love that card. However, the format has really been way more solidified than since the original Shonen Jump in back in 2010, right? Because that was such an open format. Um, Now I've realized that the matchups that Prisma is good in, I find tend to be easier matchups for us anyways. The matchups that it's not great in, like versus Blackwings, Vayu Turbo, Hero Beat, matchups like they all have more back row, and Prisma tends to sometimes be a liability in those matchups. So because of that, there's a lot of times I already sided out the card anyways in those matchups, and realistically, it felt very much in the same vein as Secutor, that it would sometimes be like a win more um, in good matchups, whereas being sometimes a detriment in the bad matchups. Now, specifically Secutor, I do think that card is still good enough to appear on my list, so it is on my side deck. I side it in for matchups that I don't think it's weak into, um, specifically non-back row centered decks, that I feel like I can get away with it, because it's such a powerhouse play. And the biggest notable matchup I'd say is that Secutor drastically changes how the Dragon Turbo matchup feels, because their field is most classically just a board of nothings or cards you're not worried about when it comes to their back row. So you can almost freely Secutor all the time. And if you can drop a Herc against Dragon Turbo before they go off, then you're just going to win the game. Um, so that's why it's still there. But that's also why I dropped those cards from main deck. I wanted to focus on the main engine. I also wanted to get the monster count down to 13 normal summons, where if you see, we don't count Tiger as a normal summon, and we're not normal summoning Hedgeguard normally. So it has 13 normal summons. I wanted that for 41 card deck. Um, Mainly, I wanted to keep it actually at a 40 card deck because I did a lot of testing with numbers with a good friend of mine, Logan, who ended up running a calculator for me to help me figure out the least amount of bricks I could have in my deck. And the testing has really shown that it was pretty accurate. They found out the best numbers for the at least the styles of how I like to keep my hands in this deck. For me, seemed to be at 13 normal summons and 40 cards. Um, but it was, but at the same time, I wanted the ability to side in a additional normal summon. Specifically, when I side in DD Royalty or Secutor, I'm not actually taking out any of the Glads in my deck. So when I side those in at a 40 card deck, it does increase the chance I'm going to brick because I'm running more monsters than normal. So my idea was that I would run 41 cards, because Yada is effectively an upstart goblin, except Yada can also, be bait for heavy storm, stuff like that. We all know how good Yada is right now. Um, so effectively running it as that, and it could be a card that I swap out for DD Warrior Lady or Sekitor if I want to be on more monsters. So that's that. It was a little bit of a convoluted way to explain that, but hopefully you understand what I mean. I've explained it to a few people that I know in the Discords or whatever. I think it's easier to see a written explanation of that, but like, whatever. um, Anyways, for the rest of the build, um, you all know I have been really liking Cat. The whole one card power play is just really, really strong. Um, I think you want to be on 2 Sam Knight. Cat doesn't feel consistent to me unless you're on 2 Sam Knight. It becomes dead a lot more. Between Darius and a quest, I think a quest is better to have at 2, unless you're playing a heavy Prisma focused build, then maybe you want to be on 2 Darius. But I do think that between the two of them, you want to be on 3 collectively. Um, because they can effectively both get each other back from grave, and they are the ones that get back all your GBs from grave in one way or another. A quest does it a little better. Obviously, quest gets war trade as well. So that's why we run to a quest. To Red Tiari, I think it's still extremely relevant in the format. You want to run that. We all know we always run to Luquari. Um, I think you want to be main decking the Hopalomus. I think you do want to side deck a second Hopalomus, because it is just brutal into certain matchups that can't deal with a 21 wall, and getting a free tag off of a 21 wall is amazing. Um, Hedgeguard, I have many a times tested siding a second Hedgeguard or playing a second Hedgeguard. If you ever double draw this card, it feels really bad because this card's inherently a -1. It doesn't replace itself when you play it, but it's normally going to generate a +1 because you're going to tag into a Murmilla or something, or it's going to tag into a way that's going to really in a way your opponent doesn't expect. It's going to break the board. Because of that, I don't like running more than one of this card at all in my deck list. But it's still really good. Also, the fact again that it's chainable to in the damage calc and everything is really good. 2 Shrink. I think in my last build I was on 3. Um, that was one of the cards that I believe I needed to cut down on. Or I might have cut down on it before that. I forget. But either way, 2 Shrink. That's just because I'm splitting up between Shrink and Hedgeguard. If I was still on 3 Shrink, it would be because I wasn't playing Hedgeguard, but I like splitting up that kind of effect between Shrink and Hedgeguard personally. And I think Shrink in most matchups is a better card than Hedgeguard. I think the only times that Shrink isn't better is when your opponent has Heavy Storm, True Nade, or Cold Wave, or if your opponent is playing Honest or Colute. All other cases, I think Shrink's better. Also, Shrink plays around bottomless, and obviously Hedgeguard doesn't. The traps, I think they're pretty staple, pretty straightforward. The only thing from previous lists that I dropped was pole position is now in the side deck. Naturally, when cutting down to from 43 cards to effectively 40, but 41 with Yada, I obviously need to make some cuts somewhere, and pole position was the biggest flex spot. It was normally a card that I only used really game 2 and 3 in certain matchups, but you could kind of make an argument and it could be useful anywhere, because similar to Yada, it's sort of like a bait card. If they end up destroying your back row, you can flip it to blow out your opponent sometimes. Or obviously you could flip it reactively to a brain control or mind control in any matchup and potentially negate those cards. So really cool card. It is a little narrow when it comes to certain matchups in the format. That's why I wouldn't always keep it in the side deck in certain matchups. Like I wouldn't keep it in versus Blackwings. They could destroy it. They could not. But a lot of times if they go to pop it because it's an Icarus, they lost their monster on the field, so you can't really chain it to kill anything. They could mind control or brain control, but you just play it for those 2 cards. I still think it warrants side deck because really strong against hero beat because cards like Gemini Spark and all of the other reasons I explained, like cards like brain control, mind control, back row destruction, things like that. I also think it could potentially stop a Miracle Fusion depending on the board. And then also it's really good against any Frog variant. It includes Frog Heroes, Frog Monarchs, anything that would play Econ, Soul Exchange. brain control, all those cards. So it's still in my side deck. The rest of the trap lineup seems straightforward outside of the Legacy of Yada, which I explained earlier. As for the side deck, we're on one side, you're one DD Warrior Lady. I don't see a ton of machines around nowadays, and even when they do, I don't think it's that bad of a matchup for GBs. It's not a free win of a matchup by any means, but I think you have way more than enough outs to Fortress, and they do have a lot of cards in their deck that aren't good against Chariot. And then obviously cards like Fortress really obviously do get removed right away by Deep Prison Bottomless. It's just when you don't have those, it can be a little annoying, but you still have ways to work around it. So I think only one Cyber Dragon is needed. Obviously, it would be nicer if there was Prisma in here when it comes to machines, because Prisma can copy the name of Cyber Dragon, but I still don't think that the machine matchup is hurt as much by not playing Prisma and playing one Cyber Dragon on the side. As for DD Warrior Lady, reason that card's in there is that was effectively what second Cyber Dragon was removed for, because against other matchups that aren't machines, where I would side in Cyber Dragon, like Black Wings or Hero Beat or something like that, I think that I really don't like siding in two Cyber Dragons versus those decks. Cyber Dragon isn't always live. It's a really bad double draw, and those decks are already probably siding in Oppression for you. So you're effectively siding in a card that isn't always the best draw, and is dead to already the deck's biggest weakness, Oppression. I still think Cyber Dragon's good enough to side, but I never want to double draw it. DD Warrior Lady is just really solid removal. It also adds mind games to Hopaloma's plays, because if you previously against those decks, you're siding in second Hopalomas, because they have really a tough time dealing with a 2100 butt. If they hit into a Hopalomus at a different point of the game, the next time they hit into your set, they might be playing around Hopalomus, and they might purposely go into like an Armed Wing or something. If your set's DD Warrior Lady, then they just put 2 cards into an Arm Wing to then get it banished by DD Warrior Lady, and you just blew them out. So I really like that. I really like that it's also just a beater on its own. Back in the original Shonen Jump Edison, back in 2010, I actually did side 2 DD Warrior Ladies for this exact reason. So I've finally kind of gone back to my roots a little bit there and added one back to the side deck. Besides that, the rest of the side deck, 2 Ancient Forests, pretty straightforward. I think 3 is a little overkill and sometimes a little clunky. With a 40-41 card deck, between the Chariots and the Ancient Forests, I think you have enough ways to deal with Raikou when you need to. Smashing Ground, I do like the one Smashing Ground as just another removal card, just another flexible removal option. It's also nice having an additional out besides Mirror Force to Titanial. Third Chariot. I think 3 Trap Holes huge. Some people think 3 Trap Holes a lot. I think it's huge. I think you really need this against Black Wings just to round out the matchup. Between all the cards I want to take out of the main deck during the matchup, I really like bringing in 3 Trap Hole. For the longest, I was on 2 Trap Hole and Torrential Tribute. We are back to 3 Trap Hole though, because I ran into so many situations against Black Wings specifically where I lost the match because Torrential Tribute wasn't Trap Hole. At a certain point, I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm just playing 3 Trap Holes, because I don't think Torrential Tribute is winning me enough other matchups to make up for it not being a Trap Hole. I've always loved Transmigration. I think I've told you all this, but I love this card. This card's sweet. So we're playing that as a pseudo DD Crow. It's also better than DD Crow against Burial, so and it targets 2 cards. We love Third Compulse. It's just really good against certain decks. And then we still side the pole position. You can ignore these extra cards. These are from when in my last build I was siding Miracle or siding Super Poly. It's not like you need 5 million of the GBs anyways, but really, like these cards should probably just be a third Rocklanos, a third Stardust, and anything else. I don't know. The only cards you're ever gonna make are any of these. and really you're only ever going to make in this build at most 2 Chimera Techs, 1 Stardust, unless you transmigration a Starlight Road and then draw it again. You can make a second Stardust, I guess. Um, I have made 2 Harks before, I think. Yeah, I have. Never 3. I definitely haven't made 3 Geysers before, though, so. But yeah. Besides that, everybody, that is the build. I really like this. This is absurdly consistent. I It actually has bricked a lot less than my previous build for the reasons I explained earlier, just messing with the ratios of monsters to non-monsters. I feel like even less now, or at least statistically, like by the Excel sheet that we ran or whatever, I am drawing less dead hands, and from my experience, it's really good because I ran this build for the last 4 weeks of War League, and I went um, I went 3-0 versus Blackwings in the last 4 weeks of War League match wise, so that was really good. Um, so yeah, I feel really good about it. I didn't want to post you guys a bunch of Blackwings replays again and again and again. I've had a lot of Blackwings replays on this channel, or else I would have posted some of those videos, but whatever. Besides that, I hope you guys like this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But besides that, I hope everybody has a good one. And again, please reach out if you if you think that you're gonna be at RBET in Maryland next month. I'll be there, so I'd love to say hi. All right, have a good one, everybody.